Born in Port Moresby, New Guinea on December 27, 1942. The sun had barely come up yet in the morning. There was a break in the tropical fog when Second Lieutenant Richard Ira Bong got into his P-38. Lightning for his first job in battle. His breath was calm and his hands were steady, but his head was full of ideas. That would turn out to be true. Japan has been in charge of these skies for a year. That starts to change today. Through from the plastic canopy, Bong saw 40 Japanese planes take off from the sky. Bombers were led by the famous Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters. That scared Allied planes all over the Pacific. The odds were against the 12 American P-38s in every way. Rushing to stop them, the Japanese pilots couldn't have known that among those 12 Americans flew a farm boy from Wisconsin who turned out to be their worst fear. Someone whose name would soon be whispered in Japanese meeting rooms from Rabaul to the Philippines out of fear. The math behind aerial combat was about to be changed. Not just because of science, though the twin-engine Lightning changed everything, but not just by tactics, though American fighter. As ideology changed quickly, one pilot stood out because of a unique mix of natural talent. The Japanese would be shocked by how accurate their analysis and fearless violence would be. Fighter pilots from the U.S. Richard Bong had made it to the Pacific area. The air service for the Japanese Imperial Navy would never be the same again. The end of Japan's air power did not start with an important announcement, but with 2 deaths over Buna that hot morning. Bong was in the air with Captain Thomas Lynch in the 39th Fighter Squadron, the huge Japanese line with methodical accuracy. His first target was a Zero, who was thought to be unbeatable, fighter that had wiped out all Allied planes in the Pacific since Pearl Harbor. He got a Nakajima Key 43 Oscar for his second. Yet another scary Japanese fighter. Bong was given the Silver Star for these 2 wins. But the reward notice could not show what the Japanese pilots went through that day. Officer First Class Hiroshi was one of them. Nakamura, whose report on what happened after the fact was found in Japanese files decades later showed the first signs that Japanese trust was waning. The American brother or sister engine fighters struck in a way that we had never seen them work together before. One pilot, whose plane's number is unknown, showed skills that were on par with our best aces. He didn't try to battle like other people had. Pilots from the U.S. He used the strengths, speed, and height of his plane to set the rules for the interaction. This caused us a lot of trouble. The trip from a farm boy in Wisconsin to America's best fighter pilot, his journey began years before, shaped by events that things didn't seem important until you looked at them through the lens of what was to come. Born Better, Wisconsin, on September 24, 1920. Richard Ira Bong was the Carl Bong, and his wife Dora had 9 children. He was the oldest. The family farm in Popular gave Bong a simple life that was full of the ideals that would shape his character. Since when Dick Bong was a child, he saw something that changed his life forever. It was 1928, and President Calvin Coolidge went to Superior for the summer. Mail planes that went to and from the president's vacation home also flew. The Bong farm is right above it. At that point, I know I want to be a pilot. Bong would later play Remember, writing to his family, "I made model airplanes out of old paper and wood. I studied every aspect of aviation, in any magazine I could find. Flying wasn't a dream, it was fate." But what really Bong was shaped by the rules of farm life and the demands of his Swedish immigrant parents, who believed in hard work. Besides everything else, he did very well in school and graduated 10th out of 428 students. He went to Superior Central High School and played hockey, baseball for the school. He sang in the church choir and went hunting in the woods of Wisconsin, where he learned how to shoot well that would help him later. Most importantly, he learned how to be patient, pay attention, and think critically. These skills are very important in air battle. Bong signed up, but that would set him apart from other pilots in 1938. He was going to Superior State Teachers College to become an engineer, but flying caught his attention more. The civilian pilot training program, and flew alone in a Piper Cub on his 20th birthday. His teachers were impressed by how naturally he could fly. Immediately, he had the skill. He had what pilots call situational awareness, the being able to keep an eye on several planes, figure out angles and speeds, and make quick choices while under heavy fire, really tough times. On May 29, 1941, 6 months before Pearl Harbor, Bong joined the Army Air Cadet program. At Luke Field in Arizona, one of his gunnery teachers was Captain Barry Goldwater, who would go on to become a senator from Arizona in the U.S. Senate. In talks after the war, Goldwater talked about Bong in great detail. He was the best. I've never met a more natural driver, and he was very good at shooting. He was more accurate than our best teachers. But what really struck me was how he thought about things. He thought about it, made changes, and learned from each training run. The teacher was a Czech P-38 pilot whose name was lost to history. That would be the most correct assessment. Bong will always be after you. He flew an AT-6, which is one of the slowest training planes, but he was able to fly behind me in a plane that was much faster. He naturally knew how to fight in the air in 3 dimensions on January 9, 1942, 1 month after Pearl Harbor. Richard Ira Bong, second lieutenant, got his pilot wings and a commission. He could now fly, which was his dream. But instead of being sent to battle, because he got such high scores on gunnery tests, he was sent to Luke Field to teach. During the months that the war was going on in the Pacific, Bong taught other pilots. It was very frustrating, but the experience he gained would be very useful. Teaching others made him explain strategies and methods that came naturally to him. It came easily to him. In May 1942, Bong was sent to Hamilton Field, California, to learn how to fly the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. This fighter has 2 engines, and its unique twin-boom design and center NL cockpit made it different from anything else most pilots had flown. With 2 Allison V1710 engines that make 1,425 horsepower each, the Lightning could 414 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. The nose of the P-38 is armed with a 120mm cannon and 450 caliber machine guns. The concentrated firepower was deadly, but the Lightning was also tricky and cruel. Counter-rotating blades got rid of torque problems, but gave the cars a unique way of handling. The warmth wasn't good enough for flying at high altitudes, and the controls were hard to use at high speeds. A lot of pilots were afraid of the plane. Bong loved it. He knew that the P-38's speed, climb rate, and long range made it great. This made it the perfect tool for fighting in the Pacific, where battles took place over very long oceans. Bong's natural ability to fly showed up in ways that impressed and scared his leaders. On June 12, 1942, he was shot down, buzzed the house of a fellow pilot who had just gotten married while flying so low that the engine wash threw things all over the place. He flew down Market Street in San Francisco from a rooftop in the yard and used his jet wash to blow clothes off of a woman's clothesline in Oakland. General George C. Kenney, who was in charge of the 4th Air Force, scolded Bong in person. The general's words would become, "I wouldn't have you in my Air Force if you didn't want to fly down Market Street, but you are not to do that. No more of it, and I mean it." Despite my harsh words, Kenney, the young pilot, was unique. "We needed kids like this, lad," he would write later. He was brave and skilled, and was the kind of pilot who would attack when other pilots turned away. MacArthur chose Kenney to be in charge of the 5th Air Force in the South Pacific. Kenney chose 50 of the best P-38s to lead the force. To join him, and Bong was one of them. In September 1942, the general and the farm boy got to Australia. The Pacific War was about to get its deadliest bird of prey. From a skilled pilot to a feared combat ace, he went through careful training and real-life battle experiences that trained regularly. Bong was put in charge of the 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th Fighter. The squadron still flew Curtiss P-40s, though, and was known as the Fling Knights. Warhawks are old fighters that can't protect against Japanese Zeros. Instead of wasting time, General Kenney briefly put Bong with the 35th Fighter Squadron, 39th Fighter Squadron. He was sent to the fighter group at Port Moresby so he could fly missions while waiting for P-38s to arrive. Important. Bong learned from one of the Pacific's rising stars while flying under Captain Thomas Lynch. Lynch was a strategist who knew that American pilots couldn't fight Zeros on an even playing field. The Zero could beat any Allied plane fighter at low to medium altitudes. It was very easy to control because it was so small. However, it cost in terms of speed, armor protection, and building power. Lynch taught Bong the strategies that would become standard American fighter policy in the Pacific. Don't try to become a fighter. Do not touch the ground. Attack from above by diving quickly and delivering a focused burst of fire, and then move away with faster speed. If the first one hits, in case the pass fails, return to the air and start over for a new attack. Down in a zeros engagement envelope. Bong learned these things and added to them. He came up with his own ideas and estimated lead distances, deflection angles, and other pilots had trouble hitting their maneuvering goals. But Bong knew that success meant a lot. Needed getting very close, so close that it was almost impossible to miss. December 27, 1942, gave Bong learned his lesson the hard way when 40 Japanese planes hit Allied positions at 12 P-38s rushed to intercept, even though the chances were more than 3-1 against them. The Americans. Most pilots would have been careful, but Bong saw a chance. He positioned himself above the Japanese group while flying with Lynch and launched an attack with wide throttles. Open. His first aim was a Zero that was trying to attack Lynch's plane. When Bong's side slipped, he lined up his nose-mounted guns and fired a short burst at close range. Pieces of it fell through the tropical sky as it broke apart in the air. 3 more Zeros converged on Bong's location, dove toward the canopy of the bush, with the fighters chasing after him. At what he later called 2 inches above, the Bong pulled out of his dive when he saw the shortest tree in Buna. The quick move put a lot of G-forces on his body. 2 of the Zeros that were chasing the P-38 could not hit it because it was so well built. Matched the move and crashed into the bush, but Bong wasn't done yet. As he saw an ID-3A Valdive bomber when he was just above treetop level, pulling back from its attack run. The bomber was weak, slow, and full of ordnance. Bong drew close and shot. The Val exploded and Bong went back to Port Moresby, at least because he was too low to climb the huge fireball. Heights, his heart racing, and his mind already thinking about the engagement for. We learned a lot from that fight, which ended with 2 proven kills and earned Bong the Silver Star. But the real win was in their minds. Japanese pilots who made it through the battle said they saw an American pilot whose skill was the same as, or better than theirs, exceeded their best aces. At first, the stories were thought to be exaggerations about combat. They were not. Over the next 2 weeks, Bong showed that his first fight was not a fluke. You didn't just get lucky with this success. On January 7, 1943, Allied coast watchers recorded a Japanese convoy was going west toward Salamau along the south coast of New Britain. 48 American fighters were in the convoy. They rushed to attack. Lynch, Bong, and 6 other P-38s missed the at first. They met up with P-40 fighter planes, but they went straight into the Nakajima Ki-43 convoy's air umbrella. Oscar fighters. The fight went almost 4 hours and was split into 2 separate fights. The first one started at 13-15 hours. Bong fought an Oscar in a 5-minute battle that showed how well he could plan his moves. Instead of fighting, they used speed and vertical moves to stay ahead. When the Oscar pilot made the crucial mistake of turning toward Bong's chase instead of away, Bong drew up to 50 yards and fired. The Oscar broke up. After getting fuel at Doadura, Bong and the other P-38s took off. Went to, where at 15:30 hours they met 16 more Japanese fighters. Using the P-38's faster speed to blow up 2 Oscars on his first pass, he injured them. He then flew back up, reset his attack, and went through the line. Took out 1 Oscar on his second try. The next day, January 8, 1943, the battle that made Bong an official ace. 8 P-38s were guarding bombers at the time. They came across about 20 Japanese fighters. The Japanese had more fighters and were higher. The doctrine said to pull back to escape bad odds. Bong and his squadron did just that. Friends still attacked, and in the following dogfight, Bong showed the skills that would make him a great leader. 1 attacker was killed by a long burst from 200 yards away. This was a tricky redirect shot that needed precise lead calculations, while both planes were moving quickly. Bong was given the title of Fighter Ace and the Distinguished Flying Cross for this kill, which was his 5th confirmed win. More importantly, it let the Japanese know that American pilots were learning how to fight well in the Pacific. By April 1943, only 4 months into the war, Bong had shot down 10 enemy planes. He shot down 2 Japanese planes, making him a double ace. His fame was rising not just among Americans, but more and more Japanese pilots said they had seen a twin boom fighter. was handled by a very skilled pilot. The jump from beginner to ace had been quick but methodical. The P-38's twin engines taught Bong things that he carefully wrote down in his mind. He learned that they were not just power, but life. Several times, pilots came back to base on a single engine after battle damage that would have wiped out single-engine fighters. He learned that height was life. The pilot who was in charge of the battle was fought on the ground, and he learned that patience was a tool. The patient pilot made the right shot, while the impatient pilot missed. When not in battle, he did more than just add to his list of victories. He became a teacher. He taught new pilots who had just gotten off of cargo planes what he had learned the hard way. Taught them not to be afraid of the Zero's power, but to respect it. He taught them how to use their plane's speed, firepower, and toughness while avoiding its flaws, like slow handling at low speeds and a bad roll rate at high speeds. His ways of training were useful, and he would take new pilots on training trips and show them the right way to attack. Climb above the setup so that the sun is behind you and blinds the enemy. Dive at the target. Go all the way to the top speed. Line up your nose not with the goal, but with where it will be when you reach it. When your bullets come, fire quickly, no more than 3 seconds. Keep an eye on your traces and make changes. Keep diving when you reach the goal height, to get back up and start over for another attack. Never, ever, ever. Things slow down and get ready to fight. The raise to first lieutenant came in April 1943, both for his bravery in battle and for his worth, as in Bong wasn't happy with 10 kills. He had shown that he could do more. He had managed to stay alive and win. Now he had to show that he could dominate. The battle that turned Bong from a skilled ace to a famous fighter pilot took place on July 26, 1943, over. That morning, Bong led a group of 10 P-38s on a sweep north of Lae, New Guinea. Lae when he saw a group of about 20 Japanese planes flying together. The smart thing to do would be to radio for help and keep your height advantage until help came. Bong didn't make the smart move in terms of strategy. He quickly led 3 attacks into the enemy formation. Bong killed 2 Japanese attackers on his first pass. As he climbed back up, 15 more short, exact bursts of fire came at him. More Japanese fighters came to join the fight, making the odds more than 3-1 against the Americans. Squadron leaders would have told Bong to pull back, but he didn't care about the huge number of enemies. Led his plane back into the fight, and what happened next was a lesson in air combat. Bong destroyed 2 more planes. In the second battle, he killed 4 enemy planes, giving him a total of 4 kills in one mission. Action in reports that are still kept in military files. Major Bong flew with complete confidence, positioned his plane perfectly, only fired when he was sure it would hit, and never spent bullets on low-probability targets. Shots. He was very aware of what was going on around him and tracked several enemies. He was in perfect formation with his wingmen and was controlling multiple planes at the same time. The battle ended, with 10 Japanese planes destroyed, 4 by Bong himself, and no American lives were lost. For this, Bong was given the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the Army's second highest honor. Decoration for bravery. The statement praised his extreme bravery and disregard for the huge number of enemies. But the numbers alone can't show how the psychological effect on Japanese fighters, including Lieutenant Kenji Okamoto, a Zero pilot who lived through the words not found until Japanese military archives were opened. After many years, we came across the American twin boom fighter being flown by the pilot. The Ghost is what our mind calls it. He strikes from angles that aren't possible and is very accurate. Right now, our training leaders are telling us very clearly about this. Captain, they say that if you see the twin boom fighter with yellow tips on its wings, let go right away. But pulling away isn't always possible. The Ghost picks when and where to fight. That's all we can do. Bong had reached 15 years old by August 1943. Kills were confirmed and the person was promoted to captain. His fame was growing not only in the military but also in the American press, is always looking for stars. But Bong stayed surprisingly humble, disliked being the center of attention. In letters to his family that have been carefully kept by his mother, he played down what he had done. This is how every other pilot does their job. The P-38 is a beautiful airplane. The people on the ground who keep these planes moving in terrible weather are the real heroes. This modesty hid a deadly skill that came from careful study. Bong had a full debriefing with intelligence officers after every flight. He looked at gun camera video frame by frame, not to celebrate his wins, but to figure out how he could do better. He said that his best kills happened when several times he got as close as 50 yards, or less than 100 yards. That range, even short bursts were enough to hit the target. He found that he only fired for an average of 2 to 3 seconds per kill. This is proof that accuracy can be reached by placing things correctly instead of engaging for a long time. What set them apart? What made Bong different from other skilled pilots was that he didn't like taking risks. He never chased down damaged planes deep into enemy country. He never let his desire for success get in the way of good strategy, of judgment. He didn't feel bad about breaking off an engagement if things didn't go well, to pause or think. He knew that heroes who were killed were still dead and pilots who were still alive. You could fight again tomorrow. They saw something else about Bong's that was interesting. Going up, he never lost a partner. When it comes to the harsh math of air battle, many aces got kills while their wingmen died defending them, but Bong's record stood out. He cared for his wingmen as partners, not as shields that could be used up. He put them in place to support his attacks while keeping them as safe as possible. He took part in killings when his wingmen damaged planes that he was flying. Done with it. People who went with him were very loyal to him because of this. General Kenny told Bong to go back to the U.S. in November 1943 for 60 days. Days off. The general's logic was based on planning. Bong had flown non-stop, fought for almost a year. He had to rest. More importantly, his military experience helped him train a lot, getting new pilots and improving fighter tactics. But there was another reason, even though Kenny never said it out loud. Losing Bong in battle would be terrible for American confidence. Bong went to see Superior while he was on leave, State Teachers College, for an event to celebrate our return. In that place, he met Marguerite Fatendal, a smart and beautiful student who would change his life in ways that fighting could never do. They started going out together. Right away, and when Bong went back to the Pacific in January 1944, he brought a valuable item, a big picture of Marge that he had stuck on the front of his P-38 Lightning. The airplane was now called Marge after her. Other pilots put provocative art on the nose of their planes, but Bong picked at taking a nice picture of his girlfriend. Later, his sister would remember that he didn't have the bare bodies of some pilots. He had a pretty girl instead. The red Japanese pilots were still able to spot the planes by their painted wingtips and propeller spinners, and fear. But in March 1944, fate stepped in. Second Lieutenant Thomas is another driver. Malone was flying Marge on a mission to check the weather when the plane's engine stopped working over Papua New Guinea. And went down a slope. Malone got away without getting hurt, but Marge was gone, taken over by the jungle, which would hide her wrecks for 80 years. Bong was sad that his named plane had been lost, but kept flying other P-38s, each one with a picture of Marge, and his red patterns make them stand out. By April 1944, Bong had 27 confirmed, beating Captain Eddie Rickenbacker's record of 26 wins in World War I. Kills. Rickenbacker, who was America's last ace of aces, wrote Bong a letter to say congratulations. What you did is something I always hoped another American pilot would do. You're now the best of the best. Because you are brave and skilled, you respect our Air Force and our country. The newspaper of record took note of Bong's accomplishment. Newspapers all over the United States called the humble pilot from Wisconsin America's the best fighter ace in history. A magazine had a picture spread of him. Radio interviews with him were shown on TV. Real news cameras watched him all the time. The War Department knew this. Because it was good for publicity, Bong was made a major and sent on a 15-state war bond tour. Bong went to training sites and gave speeches for 2 months. Huge groups, and helped sell millions of dollars worth of war bonds. He spoke at companies that made airplanes, workers that the work they did directly helped pilots like him in battle. He went to hospitals and talked quietly with soldiers who have been hurt, giving them support without fake hope. He went to public events where mayors were present, gave him the keys to their towns, and people cheered every word he spoke. He did not like any of it. When writing to Marge, Bong told her how angry he was. I don't like being the center of attention or giving talks. I belong in a plane, not on something. My wingmates are still in battle while I'm on a trip across the country. Every A-day off from battle is a day I go on dates. Do not fail my brothers in arms. Being humble was honest. No matter how many records he broke, Bong saw himself as it was just a pilot doing his job. But the tour did what it was supposed to do. War bond. Wherever Bong went, sales went through the roof. Young men joined the army because of his as an example. Knowing that real pilots like Bong relied on their work, workers sped up their work. The quiet farm this boy had become, against his will, a symbol of the American drive to fight. Even though Bong didn't get it, General Kenny did. The AC's worth grew. Besides the plane he personally shot down, thousands of people were moved by him to fight better, work longer, and make sacrifices. More. General Kenny knew how Bong felt, but he had a bigger plan. Of worry. If Bong died in battle, it would be terrible for American confidence. How to fix it was beautiful. When Bong went back to the Pacific in September 1944, Kenny sent him to the offices of the 5th Air Force to teach advanced gunnery. The orders made it clear that Bong was allowed to fly flights but not go out and fight people. He was going to teach other pilots and get better. Fighter strategy was important work that kept him from going on the most dangerous missions. Bong found the way out right away. He was told not to go looking for fights. They didn't say he couldn't fight if he was found. During the Philippines War, Bong was able to be reached by air from Tloban, being in just the right spot when Japanese planes flew by. His number of victories kept going up, 28 kills, 35 hits. In late 1944, the Philippines War gave places with lots of targets. Japanese air power, though much weaker then, it was not as strong as it was in 1942, but it still fought hard against MacArthur's comeback. Attacks by the kamikaze were starting. American ships were scared of the desperate suicide missions that were on offer. There were chances for fighter pilots like Bong to stop the attackers before they got to the fleet. Each gun cameras caught the fight on film, and it was confirmed by several as witnesses. There was no dramatization or making claims bigger than they were. Every kill was real. The video from Bong's gun camera that was looked at by intelligence officers showed a pattern that makes sense. Short gun bursts that last for about 2 to 3 seconds. Targets that are not far away, usually less than 100 yards. Disengagement right away after firing and running away quickly to get away before other enemy fighters could respond. It was methodical, effective, and dangerous. As his score got closer to 40, there was talk of grew about when he would be sent home for good. The general walked a tightrope. He didn't want to lose America's best player to a lucky enemy, but he did want Bong to break records and boost confidence. Shot. The answer was to slowly cut down on Bong's missions while still giving him enough chances to hit level 40. Kills, a round number that would make him famous. On December 12, 1944, at Tloban Airport on Lee, General Douglas MacArthur gave Bong the Medal of Honor in person. MacArthur, well known for giving dramatic speeches, threw out his prepared comments and spoke from the heart. Major Richard Ira Bong, who ruled the skies from New Guinea to the Philippines. I now welcome you to the group of the greatest people in the world, the people who have been given the Congressional Medal of Honor of the United States. The wedding took place on the same airport where Bong had flown a lot of his last flights. In the distance, fighter planes lined the runway. 100. Even though it was very hot, the soldiers stood at attention. MacArthur, who was wearing his famous sunglasses and khakis, gave the medal with a rare level of real emotion. He knew that Bong stood for more than achieving your own goals. He showed that American soldiers could fight as well as, or better than any enemy's best soldiers. Could play field. The event was filmed and shown on newsreels all over the United States. The humble pilot stood at attention, clearly unhappy with all the attention, as MacArthur gave him the Medal of Honor. His clothing. The note that came with the medal was very specific and thorough. He talked about his 40 wins, his leadership, his duty, and how heroic he was. But it might not fully show what Bong had done. He hadn't just shot down 40 planes. Having changed the way Americans fight, he had taught a lot of pilots. Having shown that skill and discipline could beat the chances and skilled opponents. 5 days after getting the Medal of Honor on December 17, 1944, Bong's 40th and last flying victory. Beating the Philippines. The interaction worked as it should have. Bong dove on a group of Japanese, fought, killed one with a 3-second burst of fire, and then climbed away before the other Japanese planes had time to respond. Gun camera video showed the target plane exploding in the air, killing the pilot, not being able to get out of it. It was the 40th kill, and no other American would ever beat that number. Captain MacArthur and Kenny both agreed behind the scenes. Bong had done enough. With 40 kills and the Medal of Honor, he would be sent home for good before he could be killed in battle. The choice was both logical and emotional. It would be terrible for Bong's reputation to lose him now. Sad personal event. He had done enough to deserve to live. In January 1945, Richard Bong came back to the U.S. as the most famous fighter pilot in U.S. history. What the press said was strong. There were stories about the ace of aces in every newspaper. Radio, he was interviewed by shows. Newsreels showed video of the ceremony where he received his Medal of Honor. But what people in America really wanted was interested in people. They were interested in Marge. On February 10, 1945, it was in Superior, Wisconsin, that Richard Bong and Marguerite Vattendahl got married. The wedding was on the front page of newspapers all over the country. 100 many well-wishers came. The wedding was simple but beautiful, showing how much they cared about their small town and how real they were. They shared love. The wedding took place in Superior at Concordia Lutheran Church. A traditional white gown was worn by Marge. Dick wore his dress uniform from the Army and Air Force with his Medal of Honor clearly visible. His squadron buddies who were able to make it served as groomsmen. The church was packed with family, friends, people from the area, and media who wrote down everything for a public eager for good news after years of war. For Bong, who had been in battle for 3 years, the wedding was a big deal, stood for peace, normalcy, and a future without war. In his wedding vows, in front of hundreds of people, he promised Marge a life without the risks he had lived through. He talked about putting up a house, having a family, and pursuing a job in aviation while not in combat. The dreams for a man who had lived with death for 3 years. They were simple but deep. The celebration was a happy event. People raised their glasses, told stories, and laughed. The room was full. The war seemed far away for a while. Bong danced with his new partner. He smiled for pictures as a bride and thought about the future, where his biggest problems would be life and death fights at 20,000 feet should not be the focus of the military. What a couple. They went on their honeymoon to California, where Bong had taken a job as a test pilot for Lockheed Aircraft Corporation. His experience in battle made him a great person to look over new fighter designs. He would help make the next American fighters, especially the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, which was the country's first working jet. Soldier. For a pilot like Bong, it looked like the perfect job. Test flying was fun and challenging, but it wasn't as dangerous as battle. He and Marge could make a life together, while also helping to improve aviation. But jet planes in 1945 were testing new ideas and were risky. The technology that was being tested was cutting edge. The show was unmatched, but it was not clear how reliable it was. Jet engines were not always reliable. Control systems were new to them. Peace of mind procedures were still being worked out by making mistakes and learning from them. There was a risk in every test flight. In the morning of on August 6, 1945, Bong went to Lockheed's Burbank location for a regular checkup. The acceptance flight of the P-80, a story with the number 4,485,048. It had been 4 hours and 15 minutes since his last flight in the P-80, 12 flights. By the standards of a test pilot, he was still getting used to the features of an aircraft. He was comfortable and sure of himself for a battle pilot. The P-80 Shooting Star was a symbol of America's future in flight. With a top speed of 594 miles per hour, which was a lot faster than any fighter with propellers, the jet engine is buried in the fuselage, and air intakes are placed on the sides. In the sides of the aircraft was a big deal, but because the tech was so new, procedures were still being improved by learning from actual use. Each and every test flight helped the growing body of knowledge about how jet planes work. The pre-flight check didn't find anything strange. Bong started the one Allison J-33 turbojet engine the right way, airplane. The whine from the engine was very different from the roar of the piston engines he had flown in battle. He taxied to runway 15 and got permission to take off at 14:30 time in your area. A lot of people saw the sleek plane start its takeoff roll. The P-80 quickly reached spinning speed, which was a great sign of its acceleration. Bong took off easily and started to climb. At an elevation of about 300 feet, black smoke puffs were seen coming from the engine by other people. The plane started to roll to the right, then stopped. For a moment, the roof broke apart and fell away. The Bong had started steps for ejection, but then the engine stopped working at all. The P-80 had a pitch nose, down into a steep drop. Even though Bong jumped out of the plane, his height it was very low, maybe 200 feet. The parachute opened and the cover broke. The parachute opened, but there wasn't enough time or height for it to slow down Bong's fall. He at the corner of Oxnard Street and Satsuma Avenue in Burbank. It hit the ground very quickly. The P-80 impacted seconds later with its nose down and fuel bursting when it hit. As soon as emergency workers got to Bong, he had already died from the hit. The probe afterward found that the main fuel pump had stopped working during takeoff. There was a spare auxiliary pump placed on the left side console of the cockpit. A button that Bong would have had to turn on could turn on the pump. Find and turn on while the engine stops working, you lose control, and you have to decide to eject. It looked into couldn't tell if Bong had forgotten to turn it on in case of an emergency or couldn't reach the switch before you eject. Captain Ray Crawford, another test pilot, said that Bong had said they forgot to turn on the backup pump during a previous flight when the main pump wasn't working. Failed for a while. The mistake was fixed in the air without any problems, but test pilots were told not to make the same mistakes again. In the harsh environment of testing experimental airplanes, there isn't always a second chance. On August 7, 1945, everyone learned that Bong had died. Newspapers all over the United States put the news story right below or next to headlines about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima the day before. It was impossible to avoid the cruel comedy. Major Richard Ira Bong lived through 3 years of fighting against the Japanese Imperial Air Force, flew more than 200 flights and fought hundreds of air battles before he was captured. Not hurt. After that, he died while flying an American plane in California on the WWII. The atomic bomb marked the end of the war on the same day. Marge Bong was very sad. They had been married for less time, more than 6 months. They were just getting started with their life together. Years ago in talks she would talk about that day with pain that would never go away. Dick. He lived through everything the Japanese did to him. He came to my house. We were going to make a life together. Afterward, he was gone in an instant. It still makes me think of how cruel it was. Who is Chuck Jerger? Would become the most famous test pilot in American history when he broke the sound barrier 2 years later. Wrote about Bong's death in the book about his life. He said that test pilots of that time dealt with the high number of deaths by getting angry instead of sad, to deal with the scary death rates as a psychic defense. However, Bong's death was the worst. He was supposed to make it. He was able to stay alive because he was smart and brave. His death seemed to be a cosmic not fair. A lot of people came to the funeral in popular Wisconsin. There were military honor guards on both sides of the coffin. General Kenny was there himself, and his sadness was clear. Marge walked behind the coffin with the help of family members. She hid her pain on her face with a mask. The small farms. The town that sent its most beloved son to war got him back to bury him, but not the way anyone had hoped. The age of Major Richard Ira Bong was 24. The things Bong left behind were very large. Beyond his record of 40 confirmed wins in the air, his methods were used by everyone. What jet pilot training schools teach. The methods he came up with, like energy control and altitude advantage. For decades, every American fighter pilot learned how to fire at close range as part of the boom and zoom strikes. He showed that American pilots with the right gear and training could beat Japan's best. The mental health. The effect on Japanese pilots was just as big. Japan's Saburo Sakai, a famous ace who lived through the war and is known to have killed 64 enemy soldiers, spoke at length about American pilots in talks after the war. He was completely honest in his evaluation. The P-38 would fly over, the Zero could fly at that height. When they were flying high, their speed let them getting into good places. After this, the big fighters would jump out of the sky and hit the poor Zero fighters. It looked like the P-38s were in a great spot. They could fight on their own time without anyone else's help, on their own terms. The Lightning became one of the most dangerous enemy planes when things got like this. The P-38 attacked in how the Zero fighter pilot felt about his job. The awards that Bong won during his short career showed how impressive his accomplishments were. The Medal of Honor is the greatest military honor in the United States. 6 gold stars, 2 silver stars, and the Distinguished Service Cross, 15 flying medals and 15 crosses. There are a total of 27 medals for bravery and success. But people who knew him said that his favorite saying stayed simple: "We're being good at our job." In the years after World War II, Richard Bong was many monuments are built to honor them. The Better Wisconsin Airport was named Richard Bong Airport. The Veterans History Center at Richard Bong opened in Superior, which has displays about Bong and other American soldiers. A Bong, in the Superior Central High School Memorial Room, his uniform, medals, photos, and other items are on show. Outside, there is a rebuilt P-38 Lightning that looks a lot like the one Bong flew to fame. Streets in the United States, his name is on bridges and streets. In 1986, 41 years after Richard Bong was accepted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame after his death. The event brought people together, men from his squadron who were still alive and remembered flying with him. They were now old guys. This is Colonel Gerald Johnson, spoke at the entrance, and flew with Bong in the 49th Fighter Group. Dick Bong was the most skilled driver I've ever met. We don't remember him for that, though. We remember because he was good for everyone else. He showed us how to stay alive. He showed us that skill and discipline were stronger than pure anger. He showed that hard work and planning could defeat any odds. We felt proud to have flown with him. Bong's crashed P-38 Marge was found in May 2024. Put an end to a story that had been unfinished for 8 decades. Together, on May 16, 2024, a group of Pacific wrecks in the Richard I Bong Veterans Historical Center found wreckage in a Papua New Guinea valley, the province of New Guinea's Madang. Justin Talon, who runs Pacific Wrecks, described finding 2 engines that were partly buried in the ground. The propeller spinners still had red paint on them. Jerry Philcott, Bong's 99-year-old sister, was happy about the find out. The numbers from Bong's fighting history show that he did amazing things. 40 for sure aerial wins, a record that still stands today. Been in more than 200 combat flights, over 500 hours of battle flight time, and no wingmen have been lost while he was in charge. Taking charge. These numbers show that Bong is not only the best ace in America, but also one of the best jet pilots in history. Thomas McGuire, who was on the plane with Bong and got 38 kills, making him America's 2nd highest scoring ace. What made Bong stand out? Dick never had the coolest plane. He didn't do aerobatics when you're fighting. There were no risks he didn't need to take. However, put himself in the perfect place, fired at the perfect time, and never missed a shot. Shots. He thought of air battle as an engineering problem and figured out the angles, close the gap, kill the target, and safely withdraw. It was method used to deal with chaos. Since Bong's death 79 years ago, his record of 40 wins, which hasn't been broken by an American pilot yet, it's not for lack of the chance. There were American fighters in Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, and many other wars, some other problems. But the way air wars were fought changed. Wide-body jets cut down on the time of meetings. Guns were replaced by missiles as the main weapon. Having better air power was often accomplished quickly, making it harder for pilots to get a lot of victories. Bong's record is a memorial to a certain era and style of war that is no longer happening. For Marge Bong, who got married again later, and her first husband, who became Marge Ducker, was an important part of who she was for the rest of her long life. She changed into a tireless supporter of soldiers and the study of military history. She was very important in making the Richard I Veterans Historical Center and worked to make sure that Dick's memory would live on in the hearts of future generations. In a letter. At the end of her life, Marge thought back on her short marriage. During World War II, that was probably the most patriotic time in history for the normal person. A lot of people went through World War II and went through all of this. They are still living and can tell younger people about their lives. A generation. This was Dick's best phrase: "We are just doing our job." Our job at the Heritage Center is to honor all the heroes who came out of World War II in a way that is fitting. Great War. Richard Ira Bong's last mission in battle was on December 17, 1944. On August 6, 1945, he died while trying a new type of jet fighter. He was married for less than 6 months, lived for only 24 years, and fought for less than 3 years. Still, in that short time, he changed air combat, had an effect on tactical strategy. Fighter pilots for generations were moved by him, and he will always be a part of American military history. Major Richard Ira Bong earned 40 wins in the air during 3 years of combat. Still, what he really did was better. He proved it. That tactical discipline and analytical thought were better than raw aggression. He proved that tech didn't matter without workers who are skilled. He set high standards for success that still motivate people today. Japan was afraid of him. For a good reason. He was the best person they had ever met. The captain of the plane from New Guinea to the Philippines in the sky. The best possible hand, the U.S. most dangerous fighter driver.